Hey everyone, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we finally get to talk about Big Navi, RDNA 2 and all of the AMD graphics card greatness that you've been waiting ages to hear from. Now we've done an awful lot of testing for you, as always, so you're going to need to get a cup of tea, get yourself comfortable and get yourself ready to be wowed. So, 6800, 6800 XT, there's not a great deal of difference in all honesty, aesthetically. The baby one is a 2 slot, the Big Daddy is a 2.5 slot. There's not a great deal of difference in price though. So dollar wise, because we've not been given anything in GBP yet, this is going to set you back $579. This one's going to set you back $649, so very close considering they are two ends of the scale in reality. But lots of other reviewers are going to have done preview videos and are going to tell you all about the stream counts and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to keep it about the raw performance, and I'm also going to keep it about personal kind of experiences with the cards as well. Kind of get a little bit more nitty gritty with you, more like a chat at a mate with a pub. Now, some of you, the system that I tested with is the 3950X. So I know straight away some of you are going to say, why didn't you test with a 5? Well, the thing is, we build a test rig for graphics cards and then we test all of the graphics cards with the same test rig. So before the 3000 series launched, we moved on to an AMD 3950X, retested all of the graphics cards, and that took a couple of weeks in itself. But we are, in the short term, going to make a move to a 5900X, just so that we're on slightly better clock speeds and we are on newer tech. It will also be when we go and test the memory caching or memory access kind of feature, because that's only available on a 5000 series processor with these. But then that does come into a little predicament in that there wasn't a great deal of processors available at launch. They all sold out pretty much instantaneously. And that does mean that if you did want to use that feature, that you obviously then have to have a 5000 series CPU. So it's a bit of a limiting factor, and I would assume the larger majority of you, at least at first, are going to be using other processors, maybe slightly old ones, 3000 series Ryzen, for example. So that's why we've done that. And also, the reason why we've not done that is we did pop a 5000 series in. It means we have to go and test all of the graphics cards again, which is weeks of work, and it would have just been a little bit of a nightmare. And just to clear things up as well, so that you don't think I'm being unfair, because I know a lot of the fanboys instantly jump on and start saying that, oh, you've only done that to make NVIDIA look better. I actually did go and say to AMD before these were turning up, do you want me to switch the processor out? Because if you do, then I really need to get going on testing before these even arrive. And they said it's only really the memory side of things, so I wouldn't necessarily worry. Most important thing we think for you to be able to test is Rage, and that is available on all of them, so don't worry about it. So I was okay, right, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, so I'm just airing that so that you are aware and you don't think I'm doing things on purpose. I can also say, before I have even filmed this video, AMD have seen all of the results as well, and they are completely fine with them. So it kind of, they sit where they would think. So when you do see the results, you don't necessarily have to have a heart attack about it. And we will discuss all these points anyway. Now, power has always been a bit of a thing with AMD that could cause problems. Graphics card wise specifically, these ones they fit in beautifully, I will say, to the point where the 6800 is pretty much there, almost on point with the 3070, where I think I'll be as completely fair about this. I genuinely think they have been tuned to match. The 6800 XT is just below the 3080 Founders. Again, it felt very kind of like manufactured to hit that kind of price PowerPoint. Now I will say as well, in the software, to move the slider for the power connector, power percentage up actually does unlock more performance from the cards. It's very, very simple. So if you, that in itself, overclocking wise, you can go in there, move that slider across, and it will instantly make them perform better as well. So it does make me think that they've been kind of given a specific amount of power to sit kind of nicely in a graph. But there is much more available if you would like it, have the cooling and all of that sort of stuff. But they do kind of auto overclock themselves anyway. And so it's not a bad thing that they've been hit at a power point, because at the end of the day you have got limitations with power connectors, you've got certain things for board wattages and stuff. So you don't need to hear me saying that and me think it's being detrimental. Just chatting to you about the way that they've kind of comparing graphs. One thing I will say though is randomly the rage mode did pull a bit more power. Now you do need to remember with rage mode it changes more than the graphics card as well. So that's why it looks like it's pulling more power, is because it's a full system wattage. Rage mode in itself did pull a fair bit more power. It was like an extra 30 watts basically. But as you'll see in the graphs, rage mode in actual performance, it was minor, and I would always tick it. But I'm going to say I think it should just come, in reality, I think it should come in rage mode normally. And you should have to then go in, I think rage mode should be the normal mode. And then if you want to turn it into like silent mode or, something like that, the other modes that are available, I think you should have to manually select it. GPU thermals, they did actually do really well. Now I've left one of the numbers in which you may not like on purpose. So that was with the 6800 overclock. So the 6800 overclock, come on in. Come on. The 6800 overclock, I left that on an auto fan speed just to kind of show you. It's not to make it look bad, but it was the fact that I'd done a manual overclock on the card and it then got itself to that temperature and then sorted the fan speeds out accordingly. Turning the fan speeds up brought the temperatures down, but it made no difference to the performance. So that, in that point for me, it then made me realise that the cooling was actually more than capable of being able to do it. If I hadn't have, you okay? I can't see my graphs. It was kind of, not necessarily an unfair test, but it was a worst case scenario test. With the 6800 XT manual overclock, I actually had those fans on 100%, and it did kind of need it as well because they got warm. But the most important thing here is you got the vanilla 6800 down at the bottom of the graph, and the coolers are actually really good. When I saw this compared to the 3000 series, I know it's a funky design with the 3080, but they did perform and were very quiet. These are also very, very quiet. I was pleasantly surprised with these. I didn't hear any massive spin-ups or anything like that. And to be fair, even when the fans were on 100%, it was much, much quieter than they ever have been in the past. So these cards, even like this as a plain rebrand that you might get with some of the cheaper brands out there, they've done very, very well with them. And I'm not completely sold with the looks. It feels a bit aged. It's probably the best way I can put it. I do think that the aftermarket cards are going to bring another level to it. But I think what they've basically done with these is they've concentrated on the PCB and the componentry, and it's just turned, they've not spent too long designing the cooler and adding unnecessary price. So in that regard, I think they've probably done the right sort of thing. You're going to jump up there? Come on. So that's your thermals. Now, Dirt 5. This was a game that AMD specifically sent me quite late in the day. I'd done a lot of my testing by this point and I had to go back and redo it. But this is the one that I've concentrated on a game for you, that you can see all the different modes. So you can see the OC is the manual overclock. Then you've got soft overclock. That's literally me going in to the software and going GPU overclock on the 6800 because Rage isn't available. And then with Rage on the 6800 XT rather than the soft overclock. So you can understand what's going on there. I will also say that there are a lot more graphs on the Overclock 3D website, and the link is underneath. You can go and have a look. You can also go and pick through all of the details about the PCB, all of the basically the slides that AMD have sent us to learn about the cards. You can go and see all of that information over there. And I would genuinely say, if you're interested enough that you're considering this as a purchase, go and have a look on the website, because I can and have gone into a lot more detail. Videos more about kind of like personal thoughts rather than technical details and all of that sort of stuff. So there's this graph for Dirt 5. You'll notice that there aren't any NVIDIA cards in there. It's because I genuinely didn't have time to get any extra testing done when I also had to go and get the main review done for the website and everything. But there, with all of the other results, you will see a selection, and it's more than a selection, because with Gears 5 you can see there's an enormous graph, and this actually isn't all of the cards either, because I've taken all of the, or the bulk of the aftermarket ones out. So the only 3090 I have in that graph is the only one I've had. So with that, actually I think I did have an MSI as well, but I've taken all of the aftermarket 3080s out there because it was just a huge graph. And I've kept this mainly on point about vanilla cards, as in like the reference card. So you can see that there's a Radeon 7 in there, for example. These are all the ones that we retested on this test rig when it first got done. And so that's Gears 5. And when we move on, the next one is a synthetic. And at this point, this was when I was doing my manual overclock and I was really concentrating on my manual overclock. I haven't told you about manual overclock yet, and I should have done. So the clock speeds on these cards are amazing, but it was really interesting to kind of pick through and see how things changed even when we were running them at stock. Because one of the things I did notice was this one specifically in 1080p would be running over 2400 megahertz on its own. And then it would go down to about 2300 megahertz of 1440p. You pop it in 4K mode and it was running at about 2200, 2250 as a peak. And this one was normally about 100 megahertz-ish behind. So something that I did notice was lower resolution meant the cards were running at a higher frequency, and as you turned the resolution up, the frequency as a peak came down, so it seemed to scale. Not sure why, do need to talk to AMD about it, but it is something to kind of keep in mind. I don't think there's definitely nothing wrong with them, but I'm just saying that was the behaviour that randomly, as the resolution went up, the frequency came down, and vice versa. When I was manually overclocking the XT, I got over 2500 megahertz. Now, in the synthetics, the scores kept going up and up and up and up. But towards the last bit, the gaps between the differences between them, so I'd be going, let's say, from 2450, 2475, 2500, the gaps, so the increases in the synthetics were getting smaller between each gap. So I eventually decided to stop rather than finding instability. And in reality, I literally just turned the power slider up and we were playing around with that in reality. It didn't do much with any voltages or anything like that. Did have the fan speeds on 100%, but that was just so that I was finding the limit of the card and not the card's cooling. I would personally say if you're going to overclock this one to the level that I did, you're probably going to be wanting to think about water cooling. And I do have an EK AMD branded water cooling kit here, which I will be doing a custom build on. I just need to get the time to do it because I was surprised with it and there was absolutely no way I could get it done in time for launch. But it is going to be within the next week or so. We're going to get that all done up, built and done really nicely. It turned up in a big flight case. I did do a little video about it, which is on the channel actually, so go and take a look at that. But we will be doing a 6800 build. I'm going to be doing it with a 5950X on the ROG Dark Hero. So we're going to go full bore with it. So we're going to have some fun with it as well. But I personally want to make it a bit prettier. So I'm just waiting on some bits to come in and then I need to decide what case it's going to go in as well. Anyway, so performance-wise, the manual overclock did really well with synthetics, and you can actually see that with the manual overclock and synthetics, it actually did better than the 3080 Founders. This is something to keep in mind, because this is something where we can show that it does beat 3080. We can also show you that in reality, the Rage mode did incredibly well with this as well, but you do also need to remember with Rage mode, it's changing processor settings and stuff like that as well, which does then lean towards changing the system specs. So if you think about when I change this, the only thing that changes within the system is the GPU. So it's change the GPU, change the driver, test it. We keep everything the same because that does keep it fair. If the green team had a way that they could overclock an Intel processor, Courier. So as I was saying, if the green team had a way that they could overclock a processor, although it's good for the end user in that it can be a single switch, it would also then be deemed as being a bit unfair that it was turning the rest of the componentry up to make the GPU look better. And with these, what I've done is I've not done a full suite of rage testing, done some synthetics, done the dirts. And that's just because if I was to do a full suite, it takes me another day just to do the rage tests. And also, with the NVIDIAs, I never did a full batch of overclock testing with the OEM cards. It only ever got done on the generic cards, sorry, the aftermarket cards. That's where I do a stock and then we do an overclock. That's where I'm going to do these as well. So when the vendor cards for these come in, they will get the big overclocks and that'll all get done and they'll all end up in the graphs. And I've just run up the stairs. So I'm just being very open about it so that you guys know exactly what's going on. Then you can have a look at control. To be fair, it's a lot closer than I thought. They've done incredibly well. Some of the games, if you want to go and have a look on the OC3D website, there was a little bit more of a gap at 4K, but it's very, very specific games. And one of the things I do want to say is with these, because of the fact that both of the new consoles are going to be running, or they are running AMD hardware, I would kind of assume when the games start to filter through that we're going to see these cards. It doesn't matter what the test rig is, because I know people are going to be shouting at the screen saying, oh, you've done it on purpose to make them look bad. I've not. I genuinely want AMD to do incredibly well, and they have. But you do have to be fair about these things. Not tilt it one way, because if you tilt it one way, you can tilt it the other way as well. And it was AMD that came to me and asked me if I wanted a 3950X for my graphics card test rig before the 3000s come out. So anyway, so they have done incredibly well, but I do think they are going to do better. One of the things, and the only thing I will say is, as far as, and I've not shown you much of it, but you can go to the website, ray tracing performance was on par with the 2000 series NVIDIAs. So the way NVIDIA have gone about ray tracing is they've chucked a whole load of hardware and a little bit of software, because they all use the same API, DXR. But whereas AMD have gone a little bit of hardware and a whole lot of software. But that whole lot of software should, as I've just said with the consoles, is going to, or could come in and favour these a lot more. And where the bulk of games are not PC exclusives, I think they could end up doing quite well out of this. But it is hypothetical. It's a bit hypothetical like DLSS, for example. And when NVIDIA first launched that, it was very hypothetical about this could be amazing. And where it works now, it does do very well. And the reason why I mentioned DLSS is that is really, in reality, at launch, the only thing AMD doesn't have an answer for. It is coming, dynamic resolution scaling, but that's the one thing at the moment they don't have an answer for. Now you'll notice it's not in the graphs, and that's because when I do my testing, I have a ray tracing in a graph of its own, and I have DLSS in a graph on its own. So if I was going to, as I, so it was asked if I was putting DLSS results in the graphs, I would have to then put non-DLSS AMD results in with an NVIDIA DLSS result. And that's not fair. So we all know, or if you don't know, if you turn DLSS on, it basically, you take a smaller resolution, which obviously puts performance up, and then DLSS sorts all the nice bits out, makes it look as good, if not better, than the resolution that it should have been, and then it just runs quicker. So effectively, it would have been making these look considerably worse. So I'm not going to do that until they have their answer for it. So when dynamic resolution scaling does come out, we will test it and then we can compare it. But I'm not about going to trying to cause an argument with either camp. But to be fair, a lot of the NVIDIA fanboys are going to go nuts about the fact I chose not to go down that route. If you're really interested, you can go and find a DLSS page, open it on one side of your screen, and then open the AMDs up on another side of your screen, both from my website, and then you can compare them that way if you would so wish. But anyway, so 6800, 6800 XT, about $75 between them. To be fair, I was expecting there to be a bit of a bigger price difference, and if I kind of swing with this because I understand where this one they wanted to make it cheaper than the 3080, which they have done, and it's just slightly behind in the bulk of tests from the 3080 by a small margin though. And by the time you get to that point, one of the things I will say with the XT is on average when it beat the 3080, it was creaming the 3080 on the high frames per second tests. So 1080 and 1440 be where it would beat it. 4K was normally when it fell behind. With this one, it's a cracking card and it's quicker than the 3070 in everything. It doesn't fall behind. But it's weird in the fact that this is the one that I would have, but I think it should have been 50 quid cheaper. So there was a bigger gap price-wise between the two. And that's not because I'm saying that it's bad value or anything like that. It's just the difference between the two felt like it should have been bigger. But in reality, that also then means that it's like, this would be the one that I was looking at in the graphs, and I personally was favouring this one. And then you remember that there's only £75 difference for that one. And my enthusiast inside me is like, oh, I could just not order that pizza or go out with my friends when we were allowed to. But you get the kind of point that I'm trying to make. And I'll just get that one instead. But it's a very difficult one that only you guys at home are going to be able to decide. Do I like the 6000 series? Yeah, I do. And it's actually genuinely beautiful and lovely that we have a competing product. I do think, personally, that if the 3080 hadn't have been as good, these would have been considerably better. We were all shocked at launch at the price of the 3080 and the performance of the 3080. They kept that secret incredibly well. So I think they may have been caught off foot a little bit, or they weren't, ready for them to be as good. But the fact that they've still come in at the price point and they are genuinely decent competition, I think is amazing. I do think, I've got a personal feeling that the ray tracing at launch is going to be like the 2000 series NVIDIA's, in that it's the first step into it and it will get better. Probably considerably better on the next generation, but I do think as the games come out that are tuned and made for the consoles, which will have ray tracing, that these will then benefit as well. So It is a bit like when Nvidia first launched their 2000 series and it was all a bit if and this is going to happen. But they were talking about game developers for PC games. AMD have the backing with the fact that Sony and Microsoft are all going to be chucking money into getting all these games built and done and running nice with ray tracing and looking good on these new consoles, because they are new, so they're going to be throwing money left, right and centre at them, which will only end up benefiting these theoretically in the long run. And I genuinely hope they do. Now, I have had to do a lot more explanation for these because, with all due respect, normally when reviews like this go out, even though you try and be fair, people always try and pick fault and tell you that you're wrong and you've just made things look worse. The numbers got spat out, you've got the numbers. The only thing that we didn't do is that memory direct access thing, because I wasn't going to do a specific set of tests so early on. We will go back though, like I said, we are going to update this. We're going to put a 5900X in this and then go back and retest 20, 30 graphics cards and go through it all. And it'll be nuts, but it's a couple of weeks worth of work, and we're going to update this, and we're also going to update the games test rig as well, so that we're all in sync. So there's a lot more to come from us. I hope you like this review. I have had to do it proper last minute. This is literally the day I'm filming this, literally the day that the cards go live. It's about midday. The launch is 2 o'clock, so I've got to edit all this and try and get it uploaded in a couple of hours. And that's just because of all the extra testing and bits and bobs that I've had to do. And then once I've done that, I need to build a water-cooled rig. So lots and lots to do. Thank you very much for tuning in to another TTL review. Please go and subscribe. If you've made it to the end, you get yourself an internet cookie and you can say underneath, but go and see if you've ticked that bell, because a lot of people at the moment are saying to me they are not getting even notified or seeing it in their feed that I've put a video live. So if that is you, please go and have a check. And also, if you see someone saying, I haven't seen one of his videos for ages, give them a little nudge on the quiet about it as well. All love and hugs in the PC community. We all love and help each other. But for now, at least, this is the tiniest one with another video for you and the epic AMD 6000 series graphics cards out. Ding! Love you, sis.